Good. Thank you very much for joining me. It's fantastic. I can see that we've got lots of people from all over the world. That's absolutely lovely. And so I'm going to talk about this case tonight. This is Brian the Cruncher. So one of these really tricky cases where he's really heavy on his teeth and got some issues. So now just a little bit of housekeeping. My wife is coming home at around about just after 8 with my son, and you'll hear a dog barking. So that'll maybe in about half an hour's time. So if you just forgive me for that. Also, if you have any questions at all during the presentation, please just put them into the chat box, and I'll keep referring to that from time to time as well. So I'm wanting to talk about this case here where we take Brian from that to that there. So Brian was referred to me by David, who's a dentist that is local to me, just in the same village where I practice. And Brian just lives about 5 miles from the practice, very close. So the dentist supplied me with some radiographs. Now, this upper central incisor here of Brian's had been restored with a composite, and David done a really fantastic job with that. That was a root-filled tooth. I'll show you that in a minute. Heavily restored dentition, some missing teeth in the upper, subgingival calculus, not fantastic, some bone loss present, but not huge problems there. It's mainly mechanical, caries, that type of thing. So he's got these missing upper teeth, and what he wanted was something to replace his missing upper teeth there. Just this, particularly that gap here in that area. So let's have a look here further in his mouth. He's got some wear of these lower teeth. The other thing he didn't like too was just the appearance of these lower front teeth. So he wanted this space sorting out here and these teeth filling. Now, if you just look at this in particular, can you see that that tooth there is a build-up? And David, the referring dentist, had built that up in composite, and he'd done a great job, but that's a really fragile tooth. But I thought it looked really good at first. I thought, yeah, we can maybe do something and use that and just sit the denture on the back of it. But I changed my mind once I talked to David about that. But look at this bite, isn't it? Is that scary to actually get some teeth in there? Imagine if we were going to do something fixed, like an implant supported restoration. It's just a nightmare, isn't it? But this is where a denture can really help. So separation, big deep overbite, massive overbite, almost traumatic into the gingiva um on the upper on the inside there. That's there. So we've got this gap here, got this gap here. We've also got the heavily restored teeth. So what I'm thinking here immediately when I'm looking in someone's mouth, if we're heading down the denture route, I'm thinking I want to protect these upper teeth and protect them because they're so heavily restored and they're likely to get chipped and broken in the future. So I'm really thinking about here something where we've got metal on the denture that sits over those teeth and also opens the bite up too. You can see here there's the lower incisors actually occlude onto the gingiva on the inside there. I see that a lot with these deep class 2 division 2 overbites. These are his lower teeth, quite worn anteriorly and relatively heavily restored posterior dentition. Just, a normal sort of British patient that we see quite regularly. Um, So let's just have a look at this. This is my initial thoughts here when I first saw him. I drew out this design here, and if you look on the design there and compare it to the teeth there, I'm putting metal biting surfaces on all of these heavily restored teeth here, and that will then mean that this partial denture is not only a partial removable denture, it's also a it's like a semi-permanent splint that the patient can wear that's supporting the teeth. Now, I thought that David's build-up of this tooth was really good, but when I chatted with David, the referring dentist, we decided, no, let's trim that down to gum level. It's a root-treated tooth. And rather than just having the denture sitting on it, I changed the design so we'd have three artificial teeth there and have a false tooth sitting over that root there too, just purely because there's quite a high chance he's going to snap it, because he really is heavy on his teeth. So that's the design there. If you are interested, I do have these universal design sheets for lots of different combinations of missing teeth. And this chap here, this is Brian. Brian fitted into Universal Design 13, that type of arrangement of missing teeth there. So this was my first thoughts. I saw him about 4 years ago, and so what I plan to do is to trim down that upper right central incisor to gum level. I also wanted to do a wax up to check the space and look at what happens when we do a splint type denture there. When we jack the bite open, what's it going to look like on the lingual aspect? The lingual aspect is key to this because when the bite opens up, the lower jaw auto rotates backwards. And so it creates space between the upper and lower anterior teeth, but also the lower teeth go back distally relative to the upper anterior teeth. So getting a bite on backings, metal backings, is a bit tricky, but I'll talk about that just in a minute. So once we decided on the design of the denture to replace the missing upper teeth with the metal-based partial denture and semi-permanent splint, which is all in one. And then once that's done, get my colleague to build up the lower anterior teeth in composite, because I don't do that type of thing. I don't do fixed restorations like that. And I've got a colleague that does that. He's much better at it than me. So that's the overall cost of treatment. That's what we quoted Brian. And he went ahead to do that. So just remember, if you do have any questions, please stick them in the meeting chat box there. And just keep looking at that just to see if you've got any questions there. So let's go to now. These are my first impressions, my primary impressions. Now, he's got a really tight lips and cheeks and everything are quite difficult to get in there. So rehearsing these impressions are really quite important. Practicing putting the tray in and that type of thing. But I did that. And then what I got Rowan to do is to mount these casts on the articulator like that. Because what I wanted to do specifically was to see how much space we have if we open the jaw up and open the bite up there to get number one, to get teeth in, and B, to see where we would need the metal bite surface on the lingual aspect of these teeth. So that was that there. You can look how tight that is with it closed down. And then this is it with it open. Closed down. If you look at the number on the pin there, it's 2 millimeters on that pin. And then 1, 2, 3. This is about 2.5 millimeters jacked open from the normal bite position just here. So Rowan did this wax up there like that. I'm going to just have a quick look at the chat there. Mustafa has asked a question about, with regards to the upper right one, could a milled crown not have worked given the tooth is root treated, or is it too conservative an approach? Mustafa, I do think it would work, um, but it would add another maybe £1,000 or so to the treatment plan. And also, there's a very high chance that this root treated tooth would have fractured in the future, and then we would need to add it onto the denture, which would have been possible with backings. So that's why I didn't think of doing that, just purely because of cost. If and also the other thing is, if you look at a lot of my cases that you see that I write up, they're very conservatively done. I very rarely do crowns or attachments incorporated into partial dentures. I have done a lot of them in the past, but they bite me in the bum because quite often they go wrong in the future, and the patients get very cross when they've invested a lot of money and then these things don't work. So I try to be as conservative as possible, but it's a great question. So this is my diagnostic here, wax up there of the upper. This is before that upper central's been cut down to gum level. And also, Rowan did a wax up here of just to get everything just looking really nice where we've got those worn lower anterior teeth. So this is visit 2 treatment here. So what I did is I trimmed that composite crown down to gum level. This is the upper right one. Just trim that through, sand it down. I like using these enhanced finishing burrs. The burr that I cut through it with is a Shofu crown preparation burr with a nice chamfer tip on it, speed increasing handpiece. Just cut through that tooth, polish it in, and then, but that's, look at that bite. Is that, how scary is that? And then also I'm preparing rest surfaces and sort of rest seats and um, preparing guide surfaces on these old restorations that he's got. I'm quite happy to cut away. This is on the palatal and distal or lingual, so buccal surfaces, not buccal, but mesial, palatal, or lingual, if you want to call it that. I'm very happy to drill away old metal ceramic restorations and take away the ceramic and go back to the metal and just make that nice guide surfaces. What this does is it means that the metalwork can be thinner or not as bulky, because we've trimmed away a little bit of the tooth, and it doesn't weaken these crowns at all. So I've trimmed that tooth down. I've put my trying in, and he's he really does have an extremely heavy bite, does Brian? He's like a proper cruncher, and he split through that wax trying straight away. It's just, but this is purely a diagnostic thing for me, completely. So next, what I'm going to do now I've prepped all of the upper teeth and got them ready for doing the working impressions. And by the way, I don't really do many rest seats for these overlay type dentures where they are splints that sit over the teeth. Um, so I put green stick in the center of the custom tray, the special tray there, warm the green stick up, and then pop that into the mouth. And that, when that is soft, it means I can center the tray, line it up with the frenum, just get it centered nicely. And what I'm really thinking about at this point is, before I'm doing the impression, I want to be able to put this tray in with that green stick there without the tray touching the teeth. I don't want it to touch the teeth. I don't want the teeth to be scraped by that tray. So once I'm happy with that, I then mix up a medium mix of dense ply X cream blueprint. And this is for my working impression on which a chrome base will be made. So Claire's got those little retractors in. I can then seat my impression, and this is my working impression there for making the metal-based denture. Let's just have a little look at this here. If you've got any questions at all about these impression techniques, please let me know. That's the green stick there. You can see it pushed through the alginate a little bit, but that really means that I've got it seated really well right onto the pallet. I've recorded this lovely sulcus area here as well, which is great. And also I've got the detail of everything of these teeth there too. So one thing that I do before I take the impression, once I've got the tray loaded with the alginates, before it goes in the mouth, I rub a little bit of alginate onto the occlusal surfaces of the teeth so that it goes into all the nooks and crannies. And then it means that I record the rest seats and the teeth really well. So I was very happy with that. It's quite difficult, Brian, to get the impression tray in just because of his lips are very solid. Um, so Ronnie Mukherjee has asked, does the green stick help to push the impression material onto the palette? Absolutely. That's the whole reason for doing it. It's just great. It helps it to really seat fully into the palette so I don't get any voids on the palette because I'm wanting the metalwork to fit over that area. So, a great question. Ronnie, it's lovely. This is my working impression. Now, what I do, and you'll see it on nearly all of my partial denture cases and also complete denture cases, I love using this face bow. And the main reason is I want to have the working cast mounted in the articulator in the same position, the same orientation as it is in the patient's head. Because I want Rowan, my dental technician, to have Brian's head on the bench looking at him. And it really assists the technician in arranging the teeth. It's a really key important factor. And there's a lot of negative sort of papers about the uses of face bows at the moment, and people saying that we really don't need them at all. But I really find it extremely useful for Rowan to have the patient's head looking at him straight on the bench, because if I don't use a face bow and it's not mounted using that plane, Rowan could have the patient's head tilted on the bench like that. And it's much harder for a technician to arrange the teeth like this. Um, that's great. So, Alexandra, thank you so much. Do you have any specific instructions I could share with my lab that would get beautiful special trays like yours? Um, so yes, I think one of the really good instructions there, Alexandra, is just look at the my case studies on the website. So you just go to my case studies on my finlaysutton.co.uk teaching website and click on that. And there's lots of different cases with examples of special trays. And you'll be able to find a case that is similar to the one that you're doing, and then just ask them to do it like that. But I think the most important instruction about a special tray is, and I'm just going to quickly go back to the tray itself, like this, um, is, and this is really important, Alexandra, that the technician doesn't make it so that the tray touches the teeth. There must be plenty of space there, and Rowan will often put 3 or 4 layers of wax over the teeth whilst he's making a special tray to give space. So that's super important. Mustafa, do you always use green stick? What is your opinion on pink stick and medium-bodied silicone? Um, so alginate appears to work really well in your hands. Again, this is a great question. I love green stick, but pink stick is really good too. But I prefer in my hands green stick. But if you, Mustafa, like pink stick and it works better for you, use it. That's great. Medium-bodied silicone is a terrific impression material as well, instead of the alginate. And if you get better results and are better with silicone, stick with that. So, but I do think the border molding in denture work with green stick or pink stick is essential. The other material after that doesn't really matter too much. But thank you for that. Pink stick for border molding, absolutely. That's great. Right, let's just crack on and have a look at this. So we've got the face bow, which I think is really important. The Coyce analyzer is really good too. The John Coyce analyzer is perfect for this too. I also do the bite as well. So I've recorded the occlusion in maximum intercuspal position, MIP. So it's fully together, and I've recorded that with Futard D here. And we will then mount the casts on the articulator in this MIP position and then open that up a little bit. I prefer to use MIP in these cases and not CR, or in the UK we call it retruded contact position. I don't like using retruded contact position for these cases. I find that I get a more even bite on the denture if I record them in MIP. And this is really important because they've got metal occlusal surfaces on everything. I also took a shade this visit too, just to match it up to his existing tooth. So from the working casts, we then went straight ahead and did a mock-up, a try-in. And this is a prototype of the final denture. So that's the working cast mounted. And you can see Rowan's mounted it just there. So it's slightly under 1 millimeter on the incisal pin there. That's fully together. And then this is with the mock-up denture in, which is 2.5 millimeters jacked open. And this is a plastic try-in of the teeth there. So I'm going to pop that in the mouth when he comes in. So you can see the space there. That's it closed down, and that's it with it opened up. Importantly, from an aesthetic perspective, I think this is super important when I'm restoring these cases, is when I've got a root surface there, because we've still got the canine, we've got the incisal root, the incisor eminence just there. This is almost like a removable crown that just sits on the root. Looks way better because we've still got the gingivae there too. So this is the mock-up here. And this mock-up here is made of Duralay. It's pattern resin. Some of my colleagues are now doing that in printed. They're printing these to check them too. So this is just really great. I can take this into the mouth. I can try that in. This is jacked open. I still want the patient, importantly, to have a nice occlusion on the plate here. So I'm going to try that in the patient's mouth. Now, further back, I can clear this area and do the Scandinavian concept where we're keeping the gingivae as clear as possible on both sides. But anteriorly, I can't do that because I need to give him a bite in the front there and also protect these upper anteriors from snapping in his bite. So you can see that it's a gum fit. Wherever I've got root surface underneath, I like to have it gum fitted there. And also when we've got like a single tooth or little teeth like this, Rowan doesn't put all pink stuff on it. He just keeps it nice and short like that. So it's like a root just coming out of the gingivae. So that's the trying in place. I want to just make sure he's totally happy with that. I want to check the bite too. A, I want him to be aesthetically super happy with this. And also B, I want to know that when he touches together, with this in place that he can't tell the difference. He just feels like he's touching on both sides at the same time. That's really important. Let's have a look here. I've got a nice question from Ambreen Usmami. When you increase OVD, we are going for reorganized approach. It's in the books that we should do it in CR. Absolutely, you're dead right. And that's precisely what I was taught, Ambreen. And and this is how I've tried to manage these cases in the past. But I've found, interestingly, that restoring them in MIP and then just putting it on the articulator and opening the bite up works really well, just like this. So on the articulator, open them up in MIP and put the denture in. And the reason I'm saying that it works better for me is that when I come to do the try-in of that, I find that the bite's much more even. If I've recorded the patient in CR, and I have in the past done these with Gothic arch tracers, even on the dentate patients, I find that the patient still wants to go forward into MIP, and I have to do a lot of grinding of the splint of the metal surface. So I just find it easier to do it like that, even though you're absolutely right, Ambreen. I'm totally going against the textbooks and probably a lot of the sort of standard teaching practice worldwide with this. But what I find is working in a specialist referral practice, which is a high street practice, and patients are paying a lot of money for this work. It has to work, and so with doing this over 17 years, I've sort of honed my technique that works for me. So that's why I just like to be really honest about how I approach this. Thank you for that question. So yeah, it goes into the mouth, try it in, and make sure it's lovely and even in contact, and make sure that Brian's totally happy with the aesthetics of it too. There, you look at that, you can see the missing teeth here and how it looks so much better without any pink on. There, if Rowan put that chunk of pink on, which often comes back, it just looks really bad. So that's it in place. I can also, the great thing about this is, and say to Brian and take him over to the mirror and say, look, Brian, where you can see this bright red material, that plastic, red plastic, that's where the metal's going to be there. So he was, he was quite pleased with this. He liked it. And it did increase his vertical, but it actually improved his sort of resting position. It was nice there. That's great. So that's in with this try-in in place. And the try-ins and the mock-ups are so important. So once I'm really happy with doing the tooth positions, that's when I then go ahead and make the chrome. So this is a really vital, it's like a really important point, is this. Is, and I'm just going to get a better photo of this and I'll bring it to these here at the front. So I'm just going to bring it to the front there. So what's so important with these cases is for me, is I want to know where the teeth are going to go first, the replacement teeth, and then I can then plan and we can make the metalwork fit, and the metalwork can be engineered to fit into where I want to position the teeth. So that's why I do it. I do a try-in first, and then we then go ahead and make the metal base. So the metal base is made on the working cast at the same vertical as the mock-up here. The articulator system I use is the Danar system. I don't, if I was going to get a new system now, in the practice, I have 5 Dana articulators, so that's why I use this system. I'd probably go with Cavo now, but I think Stratos is really good. Arman Gerback is really good, and also there's no, absolutely nothing wrong with this either. The Dana. The only issue I think with Dana is you can't look at the back as easily. The newer articulators are open at the back, so you can actually look into where the teeth fit together from that, as if you're looking from the patient's throat. It's really good. Another little point I do want to make at the moment, which I think is so important with metal bases and chromes, is I've moved away from cast chrome clasps on these molar teeth, and I now get my metal technician, which is Chris Hesketh. Chris casts the metalwork as normal, but then he puts the clasp on in wrought. It's a wrought wire, and it's welded onto the cast framework. So if any of you are doing printed chromes at the moment, then they're good. The laser sintered chromes are very good, but I think the clasps are very bad and very difficult to bend. They're so rigid. So if I was making them sintered, which I don't, because I have Chris who's super at making them in the old-fashioned way. But if I was doing them laser sintered, I would actually get welded wrought cobalt chrome clasps. They're just so much more easy to bend. Um, right, Mustafa, for a case like this, would there be any merit in providing a high impact acrylic denture to test the OVD intolerance? Perhaps I'm speaking from hospital perspective where this is easier. In practice, not cost effective. So Mustafa, definitely you could do that, and I could have done that with him. But seriously, what I found is, and this is really borne out in the literature too, that increasing a patient's OVD is just absolutely fine, and patients get used to that without any difficulty. And I found that throughout my whole working career. There's a lovely paper by Bob Robert Willets, I think, from Newcastle, who summarized the literature, did a literature review on this, opening the bite, and it just showed, and there was no issues at all with patients' adaptation. But you could do it absolutely, and certainly if I was doing it for an exit fellowship case, Mustafa, if I was like going for an exam to present it as a final case, I would do it in the hospital. Say, look, we did this, blah blah. But also, I would quote that paper too. Naringa. With regards to retention, what is the reason for the clasp at the back rather than closer to the defect, more anteriorly, apart from aesthetics? Great question. The clasps, you've hit the nail on the head, Naringa. It's aesthetics. It's all about aesthetics. So these clasps are so far back, they're out of sight. When it's in the lower, if I'm doing a lower partial denture, I do prefer the clasp to be in the middle of the denture, like on the premolars or the canine, because I find that the denture tips less. It's better in terms of its fit. In the upper though, I think aesthetics are fundamental, and I don't want them showing because the clasps are really ugly, aren't they? Wassel, that's it. Um, so Mustafa, thank you. That's great. Yeah. So Naringa, so this is the metal base there, and I try that in without the teeth on. I don't put teeth on it at this point. And I think from a practical perspective, it's better to try in the chrome totally bare, so I know it's fitting without the teeth being on it in wax, because they can just get in the way. And I don't know what's holding it off if it's not fitting properly. So yeah, good luck, Mustafa, with your ISFE next year. So this is, you can see, look how we've got these struts on here to help hold those teeth on too. Really important. And this is the welded clasp, just so much easier. This is really important. What I found is if it's a cast clasp and I come to try and bend it, sometimes it alters the fit of the whole denture at the back there, and it's just a mess. And it's quite difficult to do. So that's important. The one thing just to think about though is in terms of the bite, if the bite's not correct and the patient's biting in this area here, adjusting that can thin it down a lot. And then it can become very weak in that area. So in those circumstances, if I'm in that situation, I would try and preferentially adjust the opposing tooth. And I do that quite often with Crohn's, is adjusting the opposing tooth. Great. So this is the denture there. I don't like to have polished surfaces on where they fit against the teeth. I quite like it to be kept totally like it hasn't been electrolytically polished. If I do have to adjust it, I do a little bit of sandblasting as well, just to keep it with that sort of slightly rough surface. It actually helps to retain the denture better if it's slightly not gritty, but it has that retention, a bit like a resin bonded bridge, essentially. There, so that's a fit surface. Pin dams on this too. That's great. Um, so Joanna, you've actually just asked me a question that I'm going to answer now. So you're right. You are on the ball, and greetings from the UK to Estonia. It's lovely to hear from you. Um, so yeah, if I try the chrome basin and it doesn't fit, do I correct it chairside or do I let the lab do that? If the lab, then how do you register the info for the lab? So, Joanna, I do it myself. I don't send it back. And this is what I use. I use this spray here, Oclu spray. There's another version called Arty spray and another one called Occlude. All the same. It's a powder spray which I spray onto the where it fits against the teeth, this powder spray. I then take it to the mouth, try it in, and just very gently, I don't force it, but I try and make it seat as good as possible, rock it a little bit, and then I take it out, and where it rubs off, I grind it. So wherever the powder has been rubbed away, I use this red stripe handpiece, speed increasing handpiece, show food diamond burr, and then I adjust these little areas there. But one area I don't touch is the collet edge. And the collet edge is this bit here, the part that touches the tooth. I'm happy to adjust it anywhere underneath this, Joanna, anywhere under it, but not on the collet edge, because if I do touch it there, if I adjust it there, I'm in danger of creating a gap between the tooth and the metal surface. So if we look here, that tooth there, if I ground that edge bit there, I would create a gap. So I would only adjust underneath that area, and it would absolutely be a last resort would I touch the edge bit. Now, Joanna, this is really important, and everyone here, sometimes with these metal bases that are so complicated, they don't quite fit perfectly straight away. So quite often I've got to spend a bit of time adjusting them. So sometimes it can be half an hour of just gently putting it in, taking it out, grinding a bit off, putting some more spray on, putting it in, and just doing it just over and over, just saying to the patient, this is totally normal. It's a very complicated casting. It just takes a bit of adjustment to fit. So great. Thank you for that question, Joanna. Um, why not cover the whole molar occlusal surface? As in this case, the OVD is also increased. It's a very good question. Ambrine about covering the molars. I don't fully cover them because of aesthetics. If I take it right to the edge there, the patient looks like that. You know the villain out of James Bond called Jaws, who had metal teeth. The patient can effectively look a little bit like that. So this bringing the metalwork just in a little bit like that just disguises it, and it's quite amazing how that really disguises it. If you look through some of my cases, um, in the case study section, you'll see them looking like this. So that's why I do that. But we still have a bite on that surface. They're not biting on these nut the teeth there at all on the side. Um, Nabila, with a chomper like Brian, how long does the chrome last? Do they wear out? Yeah, they do actually. They do wear out. So they've got to be quite thick. And they've got the minimum thickness of the chrome needs to be, it has to be zero point 0.5, half a millimeter thick, if possible, a bit thicker, because they do mill through it. How fast they do it, I don't know. It's how long is a piece of string, because, but I have had a patient who was a real Brookser. He was a chap called Hugh, and he had upper and lower implant supported overdentures, and he kept breaking everything. So he did metal on everything, and it took him about 4 years to wear right through the metal. But he's still running on it, even though they're really fallen to bits. They're about 10 years in now. So, but that's a good question, but it's a bit like asking how long has a patient got to live when they've got cancer or something, asking a doctor. It's just really impossible. It's one of those. Anyway, I want to try that in the mouth. And at this point, I want to just check the occlusion and make sure he's totally happy with it. And interestingly, and this is really related to Ambrine's question about the centric relation, I if I've recorded them in MIP and opened them up like this and try it in, I've got very little adjustment to do, if any. Um, so that's there. So in the mouth, let's go back there. If I do have to do some adjustment though, because I'll just say tap together, which side do you touch first? And if they say the right hand side, say it was this side they were touching first, I would sandblast that surface there so that my articulating paper shows up in the mouth. I'll use and then I'll put my articulator paper in with Miller's forceps, get the patient to bite together and grip it, and I try and pull that through. And then I take the denture out, adjust the marks, and then pop it back in the mouth, ask the patient which side they're touching first, and I repeat that until they can't tell the difference. And then I polish the surface up there, back up to buff it up to full polish. Right. So once I'm happy with the metal base there, we then go straight to fit. So Rowan then adds the teeth on and he puts the teeth back on exactly in the same place as when we did the try-in. Because this is so important, with in prosthodontics, what I found really frustrating in the past is when I've done a try-in, a prototype, and then the finished product is different. The teeth is in a slightly different place. And this is the sign of a really great technician is if they can put the teeth back in just the same place as the prototype as the try-in. So that's the denture finished, back on the articulator. We the other important thing that Rowan does is we always keep our working casts. So Rowan does everything on duplicates of the working cast. And so I've got these mounted working casts, which we can then store in the future. Should we need to add teeth onto the denture? Should we need to start again? It's just there as a record. In the future, we'll be able to scan these, scan the denture, and have a really good copy of that. So that's it there. The splint slash denture, a little bit of gum work in between. Nice tooth fitting there. I'm just checking questions. There's no questions at the moment. So this is the finished denture ready for fitting. Now we do little pin dams, if you can see there, just these little scratchings, very subtle, only about 0.2 of a millimeter, 0.3 of a millimeter, little scrapings where the metalwork is just going to sit into those areas and hopefully seal where it sits against the gingiva. I know in some countries that's not done, but we do that in Britain, and I do think it works quite nicely actually. Just seals those edges. So that's the denture finished, all nice and clear at these front edges with a plate design anteriorly like that. There, you can see my pin dams on here. The technician does that. Chris does that. I asked the technician to do that. I don't do the cutting of the pin dams. So, and you can see the pin dam here where it seals the edges, just like that. And then this very subtle gum work. It's very subtle. It's only replacing the missing tissue. So it's not bulky and big. Nice gum work, super thin. It's lovely, like that. I've not done any prep, interestingly, on these, where this is just tooth wear. He's got these ledges on these these upper teeth, and that acts like a rest seats. They're almost like pre-made rest seats for me, which is great. Look how Rowan's been brave with the tooth position just there on that lateral incisor too. So that's the end denture ready to be fitted now. And that's it fitted. And you can see here not how nice the gum work is where we've got it sitting against the root surface of that tooth there. And this nice, very thin flange just replacing that missing tissue. Naringa, you've asked a question that's nice. Any reason the palatal metal coverings not continuous in the regions of upper right 3 and upper right 4? Why have I done it open? Yeah, I've just had what I've done is we've opened it. We haven't covered that area because I want to get the saliva into those areas to help sort of limit the periodontal damage, the root caries, and that type of thing that can occur under plates. But I've had to do a plate design which covers the gingival margin, which goes against the Scandinavian philosophy of hygiene on these front ones because I wanted to give them a bite onto this metal surface here. Because if we just put the backings on the teeth with an open area at the front here, the lower front teeth would be unopposed and they would erupt into the palate again. So that's why it's a compromise, basically, but really good idea. Apologies as joined late, so I may have covered already, but why the lower anterior is not built up? This is Muhammad. Uh, we've almost, you've jumped the gun, Muhammad. We're nearly there. So, but you're dead right. That is so. How ugly are those lower teeth, aren't they? Unrestored. So now we've got this denture fitted. We can then restore these. But the other thing we did too, can you see there's a little crack in that central incisor and sort of nice little bit of staining and none in that tooth. It just makes it look really, this looks too perfect. So what we did was we just put a nice little crack in that with a blade and some other little stains, a little bit of chipping, this is using OptiGlaze composites and a scalpel blade, sandblast, and then add the composite. It's really good. Lovely. So that's it there. You can see that with that nice characterized upper central and characterized lateral too. And it looks nice. So it just starts to look real. So in the lower arch, and Mohammed, this is the um this so actually sorry, before I go on to talk about the lower teeth, Hein from New Zealand. Hi there, Hein, great to hear from you. What do you do to get anterior retention? So let's just it's the path of insertion is the key to this. So anterior retention is where it locks into these areas like that, just there. And also on the other side where we've got the single teeth. So it locks into that bit there. So that helps to retain it, Hein, just there. But if we have a look on the other side, the other teeth do too. So they help to keep it up just by slotting into the gap between those two there. That path of insertion in like that. So it just doesn't drop out. It's just really nice. And there's even metal in that place there too. It's really good. Um, Mustafa, thank you for an amazing case from a training perspective. Supposing you were going to use this for the exam, ISFE exam, with your consultant's hat on, do you think placing milled crowns onlays on the upright 4, upright 5, lower right 6, upright 7, upright 1, upright 6, given these are heavily restored teeth, would be a reasonable approach? Additionally, do you use hard and soft tissue undercuts for retention? Uh, so no, would I do loads of crowns for this ISFE case? Probably yes, but that would be for helping me practice doing crown preps and other things. And also cost isn't an issue. But I do think that this would pass the ISFE because it's so conservative and you're protecting all of these sort of heavily restored teeth. So there's an argument for and against stripping down and redoing. Um, when and often opening, taking a crown off a tooth, a really old crown, it can be a can of worms, can't it? You can have very little prep left, and then it weakens it, and then it may your root canal treatment, blah blah blah. So no is the question to that. And additionally, do I use hard and soft tissue undercuts for retention? Um, Mainly hard for undercuts, but no. No, actually, no. I use soft tissue undercuts too. So this area here will be helping to retain it as well. Um, Mustafa, on that area. So absolutely, both is the answer to your question. Are you allowing lower posterior teeth to over erupt since you have opened the bite? Samita has asked this question. Now, no, I'm not allowing over eruption because this denture is a splint. And so all of the lower teeth contact that denture as normal. So if the denture is worn, the lower teeth touch the upper denture and all of those metal surfaces. If the denture is taken out, he can still bite together as he used to do. And I think that's really important. It's nice that the patient has a comfortable bite with and without the denture in place. Great. That's great. Thanks, Mustafa, about the ISFE. Great. Let's go to this now. Now, this is my colleague does this for me in the practice. This is Zohaib does these restorations for me. So this is to restore these worn lower teeth. And Zohaib likes doing the injection molding technique for building up worn teeth, where the composite's injected into a this clear stent like that. So Zoe did that, and nice job, and it's worked really well. And that's the end product there with those restored lower teeth after injection molding. So the front of his mouth looks really nice. You know, the aesthetic part now. Obviously, that's without the denture in there. And that's the composites, and that's it there. So, so anyway, Zoe did that. But do you know what I stupidly didn't do? I didn't get him back in to adjust the denture, or look at the guidance on the denture. And this tooth snapped off really quickly. So he now was able to get with these lower composites, when he slid forward and into protrusion, he could get onto the edge of the tooth and break it off. So we repaired that and replaced it. Fortunately, Brian, when patients are paying a lot of money, they can get really cross when this happens, like really cross. Um, because I'm treating a retired dentist at the moment, and he broke a tooth off, and he's absolutely livid about it, and wants his money back, even though it's just sometimes these things happen. So I'm going through that process at the moment, and it's just ridiculous. But anyway, but when they break, it can be a real problem. But fortunately, Brian was quite fine about it. I've adjusted the occlusion here like this, and just making sure that the guidance is more on that tooth than this one in protrusion. You know, this you can see the track mark right up there, and it's like really want to lever that off. So, and then sand it right in because I just don't want any track marks if at all possible. Sometimes I have to a little bit. It's a bit trial and error, this sort of thing. And making sure these other teeth as well, I just made sure that when he can't grind across onto those two other natural teeth there. And then fortunately, 3 years later, Brian is totally stable. I'm in contact with David, his GDP, who's looking after him in Garstang, and it's all going really well. And he was a lovely guy, really nice fella. So when it broke, it wasn't a problem, which is great. So let's have a quick look at the a question. Ambream, when we give a tooth made of cobalt chromium due to limited space, we decrease tooth contact to 1/3, but in this design, all the contacts are on cobalt chrome framework. Absolutely. Yeah, so all of the bite, totally, Ambream, you're right. It's on the metalwork like that, there, just like this. So that's great. So if you this is it now. So my next session is going to be right at the end of August, and I just want to just to emphasize this. I do it doing this session each month, and it's on a Thursday. And every other session, I'm rotating it by 12 hours just to make it easier for people in New Zealand and Australia and Japan, Indonesia, and Singapore to watch this. So next time it's going to be at 7:30 in the morning, British summer time, 7:30 there. And it'll be another case. So what I'll do is I'll be writing up a case that I've treated. I'll as case study 68, and then I'll be running through that next time. Thank you so much. It's really great to hear from you all. Norma, thank you for joining me from Canada. It's absolutely lovely. Ontario. I know that we've got also Sean Dunn from Ontario there too. It's wonderful. So hopefully we'll be able to meet up at some stage. Thanks very much for joining me, and bye for now. This will be available on YouTube for you to watch again. I'll put it up tomorrow. Thanks very much indeed. Bye for now. Thank you. Bye.